The agenda for today's session includes a brief introduction, background, an overview of the gaps in the current procurement system, the benefits of the standard to accounting officers and human resource professionals, a review of how the standard is structured, the competence framework and certification requirements for procurement, and an introduction into the OPR's learning management system. The objectives of this session are to sensitize on the training standards, competence levels, and certification requirements, and to introduce the OPR's learning management system. So let's get started. To provide some context, we must first understand the impact that public procurement can have on a country. According to estimates from the Ministry of Finance, central government procurement expenditure accounted for approximately 6.5% of GDP in 2020 and an average of 6.6% of GDP in the last 5 years. This is significant. It is through the public procurement system governments acquire the inputs for the achievement of developmental objectives. Therefore, public procurement done right has the potential to significantly impact a country's development. Once equipped with a technical capability to effectively manage public procurement activities, practitioners can incorporate value-adding activities such as planning, cost control, collaborative purchasing, and effective contract management, which can result in cost savings and reduced wastage. So, what is the role of the OPR, you may ask? The OPR has many roles and responsibilities, but for today's proceedings, I will highlight the specific role that pertains to the rollout of the training standards, competence levels, and certification requirements. Section 13(1)(b) of the Act requires that the OPR set training standards, competence levels, and certification requirements to promote best practice in procurement, hereinafter referred to as the standard. In setting the standard, the OPR's goal is to support the development of public procurement capacity, training and dissemination of information, ensuring the effective application of public procurement rules through appropriate mechanisms. In this regard, the OPR has developed a competence framework for public procurement based on existing frameworks established by international counterparts in keeping with international best practice, professional bodies, and the CARICOM qualification framework, which was approved in March 2017. This framework will be elaborated later on in the presentation. Additionally, Section 13(1)(d) of the Act requires that the OPR prepare, update, and issue model handbooks incorporating standardized bidding documents, procedural forms, and relevant documents for use in public procurement and the retention and disposal of public property. For more information on the various handbooks and guidelines, please visit the Resource Center tab of the OPR's website. For ease of access, the link for the website will be posted in the chat. I will now provide a brief background on public procurement in Trinidad and Tobago. Under the existing legislative framework, ministries and departments and some statutory authorities fall under the purview of the Central Tenders Board, hereinafter referred to as the CTB, while other agencies using public funds, such as state-owned enterprises, statutory authorities, and civil society, fall outside the ambit of the CTB. Public bodies falling under the purview of the CTB are not responsible for their own procurement. giving rise to a lack of human resources with the required technical competence to deliver effectively in the procurement role. On the other hand, procuring entities that are not under the purview of the CTB operate parallel procurement systems, resulting in a lack of uniformity of procedures across these agencies and an absence of standardization in procurement documentation and practices. In addition to this, procurement has been historically viewed as an administrative role. I will now review some gaps in the current system. The methods and documents used to identify the gaps and assess the challenges related to capacity of the public procurement workforce are the reform of the public sector procurement regime, a White Paper 2005, the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2019, a consolidated event survey report arising out of a survey of participants at the capacity building workshops held by the OPR in 2019, and a questionnaire issued to named procurement officers in public bodies entitled Procurement Capacity Assessment Form, the results of which were documented in the OPR's Procurement Capacity Assessment Report 2020. According to the White Paper, Reform of the Public Sector Procurement Regime, the following challenges were highlighted in the current system. Deficiencies in the legal and regulatory framework. Under the current system, the CTB is the procuring agency of the state, but its activities are limited mainly to the tendering stage of the procurement cycle. As mentioned previously, the exclusion of several significant procuring agencies from the purview of the CTB resulted in parallel procurement systems, resulting in a lack of uniformity and standardization in process and documents, causing concerns relating to guidance and control, lack of transparency and accountability, and unfair practice. Human resource limitations. The staffing and training of the CTB's personnel constrains the organization's ability to adequately service ministries and departments. The Office of the Chief State Solicitor prepares all major contracts in the goods, works, and services areas. However, it is neither staffed nor structured to deal efficiently with the volume and complexity of the work involved or with rapid changes in technology contracts. This contributed to delays in the preparation and execution of contracts and is a major deficiency in the system. Many state-owned enterprises also lack staff properly trained in procurement. In fact, procurement is not looked upon as a professional discipline in its own right. Lack of general oversight. The partially decentralized nature of the current system extends the contracting authority among the various players without providing adequate monitoring. The CTB does not have the authority to regulate, and the regulatory procurement framework lacks the authority to audit the procurement system and ensure compliance with the rules and procedures for the award and implementation of contracts. However, the Auditor General is responsible for auditing and reporting annually on public expenditure matters. Inadequate public information. There is no system in place to provide suppliers of property and services as well as the wider public with full, up-to-date, and electronically accessible information on tender opportunities, on the status of bids and awards, and the progress of major projects. There's no single national registry of contractors, consultants, and suppliers. Some deficiencies in the system highlighted in the Auditor General's Department 2019 report on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago are as follows. Poor internal controls. The report highlighted examples of weaknesses in internal control systems. Of note, effective internal controls reduce the risk of asset loss and reduces the opportunity for fraud. There was non-adherence to regulatory financial guidelines and directives. The report also highlighted non-adherence to the regulatory and financial guidelines governing the maintenance of accounting records, resulting in numerous instances of erroneous calculations and inaccurate balances. Poor document management systems, both electronic and manual. There were findings of poor record keeping, and in some cases, there were no records. For instance, documents in support of the selection of vendors and contracts for the provision of services were not provided for examination. Limited human resources. The report highlighted a lack of adequate staff with knowledge and experience to ensure continuity of operations. For example, IT, which comprised mostly of contracted officers. Additionally, there's also loss of institutional knowledge if a person leaves or contracts are not renewed. Poor asset management. The report highlighted several instances of poor inventory and record management. For instance, logbooks used to monitor and control usage of assets were not maintained, and in some instances, assets purchased were not identified in the asset register. Lack of adequate segregation of duties. The report highlighted a lack of segregation of duties with respect to revenue collection, receipting, depositing, recording, and custody of assets in some instances, and there was no evidence of supervisory controls being implemented in the absence of segregation of duties. Lack of collaboration between ministries and departments, particularly in the acquisition of information systems. Ministries or departments continue to operate in silos, which resulted in duplication of effort and lack of synergy, and IT resources were not being used at its maximum capacity, resulting in value for money not being achieved. And no business continuity management system. The report noted that the ministries and departments examined lacked the required infrastructure to facilitate business continuity and disaster recovery due to lack of funding, noting that without a business continuity management system in place, the risk of financial and reputational loss, data breaches, and severe downtime is increased. These deficiencies are of grave concern as they directly impact public procurement execution and management. This now brings me to the new regime. The new public procurement system established by the Act is principle-based. The strength of a principle-based procurement system lies in the governance structure, the institutional framework, the individuals and their ability to discharge their responsibilities prescribed by the Act, and the public procurement and disposal of public property regulations. This system requires the individuals and the institutions involved in executing the procurement function to be highly skilled and capable for the full benefits to be derived, highlighting the role of capacity as a key pillar in a sound public procurement system. As such, under the new procurement regime, public bodies will now be required to recruit and retain adequately trained personnel with the necessary competence to manage and execute procurement activities on its behalf. In keeping with Section 61(2) of the Act, which states that each public body shall have a procurement officer who shall be responsible for public procurement and the disposal of public property for that body. Additionally, Section 61(3) of the Act states that a reference in this Act to the commission of an offence by a public body shall be construed as a reference to the commission of the offence by the procurement officer referred to in subsection 2, or an officer who purports to act in such capacity if it is proved that A, the offence was committed with his direct consent or connivance, or B, he, with knowledge, did not exercise reasonable diligence to prevent the commission of the offence. A survey of participants at the OPR's 2019 capacity building workshops revealed the following challenges faced by public bodies in implementing the new regime. 1. A lack of understanding by public bodies of the urgency and importance of having proper procurement measures implemented. 2. The need for sensitization on the Act and the regulations. 3. Can you guys hear me? Okay, thank you. I'm just confirming if everyone is hearing me, because I'm seeing in the chat that some persons were unable to hear me. Okay, so I'll continue now. Thank you. 3, the requirement for training of staff and the recruitment of additional staff to efficiently execute procurement functions. And 4, concerns about the quality of procurement training being offered by local institutions. In addition, there was a general interest in collaborative purchasing initiatives and the value that can be added from such programs. The results of a procurement capacity assessment completed by 80 named procurement officers from public bodies, hereinafter referred to as NPOs, who attended the 2019 capacity building workshops, highlighted the following capacity gaps. The absence of basic skills and knowledge required for compliance with the Act and necessary for public procurement practitioners to successfully execute functions within public bodies. Only 31.3% of the responding public bodies indicated that they have procurement and disposal staff that are qualified, possess the requisite theoretical knowledge and analytical skills to execute this critical function. In the remaining 68.7% of responding public bodies, these skills appear to be absent. The varying designations of persons holding the position of NPO and levels of such illustrated that a significant number of public bodies have not yet understood the importance of the role of the named procurement officer as required by the Act. The responding NPOs also highlighted that there was an absence of segregation within the procurement role, where persons responsible for finance were assigned as named procurement officers. A substantial 77% of responding named procurement officers revealed that they possessed limited decision-making authority to undertake procurement and disposal actions. This absence of control over the procurement and disposal functions allows a limited scope for ensuring that the procurement and disposal processes are compliant with the objects of the Act and threatens the independence of the function. And the analysis of responses also showed that 44% of procurement practitioners were not provided with capacity building opportunities by public bodies for successful execution of the procurement and disposal functions. This now brings me to the rationale for the standard. The challenges I previously mentioned reveal the importance of capacity building initiatives, setting training standards, competence levels, and certification requirements to promote best practices in public procurement and disposal of public property by the OPR. Currently, there are no formal training standards, education requirements, and competence frameworks for procurement practitioners in Trinidad and Tobago. Therefore, establishing the standards and requirements for public procurement are critical to promoting the professionalization of the public procurement function, as it contributes to certifying the competencies acquired through training. Let's delve into the benefits of this standard to accounting officers and human resource professionals. The financial regulations of the Exchequer and Audit Act set out the accountabilities of accounting officers as follows. Section 4. An accounting officer shall be responsible for ensuring A. that the financial business of the state for which he is responsible is properly conducted, and B. that public funds entrusted to his care are properly safeguarded and are applied only to the purposes intended by Parliament. And Section 5. All accounting officers are personally and pecuniarily responsible for A. the due performance of the financial duties of their departments, B. the proper collection and custody of all public monies received by them, and C. for any accounts rendered by them or under their authority. Human resource professionals will have the responsibility to 1. finalize job descriptions for roles under the procurement department, 2. generate a list of staff likely to be involved in procurement function and hire externally to supplement where required, and 3. develop a training plan for the procurement department for procurement training and certification. It is important to note that public procurement involves different types of tasks and organizations, institutions with different scopes. Therefore, a well-established, comprehensive public procurement awareness program is essential for all involved actors, with additional specific trainings according to the actual position. Section 61(2) of the Act states that a public body shall have a procurement officer who shall be responsible for public procurement and the disposal of public property for that body, and shall notify the office in writing of the name and designation of its procurement officer. The named procurement officer, or NPO, is responsible for overseeing and managing the procurement function within the respective public body. Public bodies would be directly responsible for complying with the Act, the regulations, handbooks and guidelines, whilst ensuring the achievement of its strategic mandate. As such, when selecting procurement practitioners, accounting officers and human resource professionals must ensure that they possess the requisite skills and competence to manage the complexity of procurement being executed by the public body in order to maximize value for money while simultaneously taking into account socioeconomic and environmental considerations in their purchasing decisions. Of note, the standard will identify the knowledge, skills, and competencies required of procurement practitioners. As such, it can be used by accounting officers and human resource professionals to build a cadre of competent procurement personnel and a globally competitive public procurement system with their respective public bodies. Therefore, HR professionals must be champions of change in this process. Setting the training standards, competence levels, and certification requirements for procurement is an important step in transforming procurement from an administrative function to a professional one in Trinidad and Tobago. The standard identifies the core knowledge and competencies that procurement practitioners must possess at the 3 levels of competence. Thus, the standard can assist HR professionals and accounting officers in defining job descriptions for procurement roles within their public body and in selecting appropriately qualified and competent procurement practitioners, giving consideration to the level of expenditure and range of procurement activities being executed by the public body. The standard also enables HR professionals and accounting officers as recruiters to understand the different levels of competence. It enables them to assess procurement practitioners and identify any knowledge gaps and training and development required. By training practitioners and filling the gaps in knowledge, public bodies can motivate staff and build a more competent cadre of practitioners. Additionally, the standard can assist HR professionals and accounting officers in performance management, acting as a benchmark to monitor progress, assess improvement, and for continuous improvement. Building a well-operating public procurement system with training and development requires some time. Therefore, measures should be taken to institute training upon proclamation of the Act. To assist with this training agenda and continuous improvement in procurement, the OPR is currently acquiring a learning management system. MPOs will be provided with usernames and passwords to have access to the system once completed. The LMS will provide interactive content relating to the Act, the regulations, handbooks and guidelines, systems, policies, procedures, and processes. Additional details on this will be provided later in the presentation. Overall, through these mechanisms, the standard is expected to improve accountability, transparency, and good governance in the public procurement system. I will now briefly go through how the standard is structured. The standard consists of the following elements. Training standards. This can be used to define curricula in education and training institutions and ensure the quality and consistency of training, the core knowledge and capabilities that public procurement practitioners should possess. These are the elements that education and training institutions should ensure are included in public procurement training programs. It is an essential link between legislative and employment requirements. Competence levels. Competencies are the skills, knowledge, and behavioral characteristics that enable us for high performance in a particular field, and it will enable individuals and employers to better understand and compare the different levels of competence that exist and allow for mobility of practitioners across public bodies. Of note, it will give training providers an understanding of the requirements of practitioners in public procurement when linked to the levels of qualifications and capabilities of practitioners holding a particular qualification. And certification requirements. This sets the minimum qualification levels for practitioners operating at each competence level. They are designed to standardize the level of qualifications for public procurement practitioners operating in Trinidad and Tobago. Accounting officers and HR professionals should be guided by the 3 competence levels outlined in the OPR's Developing Procurement Capacity Guideline from basic to advanced, as illustrated here and utilized in the standard. These levels represent the core skills and tasks that individuals should be capable of at each advancing stage of the profession. Based on the 3 competence levels highlighted above, NPOs can fall under any of the competence levels. However, this will be guided by the level of expenditure of your public body. For example, a public body that has a small expenditure may have a procurement unit of 1 or 2 persons conducting low-level, low-risk procurement. Therefore, the MPO in this regard could be listed under the typical job role of the basic level. However, the MPO must have the knowledge and competence required to fulfill the responsibilities related to the role. The knowledge and capability requirements included in the standard were developed in keeping with the following 5 pillars of procurement capability and performance assessment as enablers of procurement capacity. Pillar 1 represents procurement leadership and governance. Pillar 2, significant procurement planning. Pillar 3 represents managing supply. Pillar 4, performance management, and Pillar 5 represents people. Each pillar will be explained later in the presentation. Of note, accounting officers and HR professionals should be aware of the topics as well as the knowledge and competencies required by procurement practitioners at each competency level, as elaborated in the competency framework. This now brings me to the end of my presentation, and I will hand you over to our Head of Procurement Capacity Development, Ms. Della Rosa. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Samantha. So I will take you through the competence framework for your public procurement practitioners, highlighting the required knowledge and skills at each competence level. So professionalization of the public procurement workforce is essential to ensure that your practitioners have the skills, knowledge, and integrity needed to perform their jobs and tasks in compliance with the law and in an efficient, effective, and strategic manner to deliver best value for money. Now, professionalization as well as human resource management in public procurement currently faces a number of challenges. As mentioned by Samantha, procurement is often not a clearly defined organizational function with a corresponding training, recruitment, and career paths. It is frequently conducted as an additional task by civil servants that may lack specific procurement-related skills. So the competence framework should be considered by yourselves, HR professionals, as well as accounting officers, as a tool and an enabler for making procurement professional skills and qualifications easier to understand and compare. So public bodies can use the framework to determine the set of competencies that are relevant to each of the job profiles present within your organization and to set the appropriate target proficiency levels for those competencies. When gaps are identified and needs for development or recruitment are targeted, public bodies can utilize a framework to ensure that you attract, develop, as well as you retain your available talent and enable a learning culture and environment where your staff members are offered the opportunity to develop as well as improve in line with their own professional goals. So here we have highlighted the framework. Now, it serves as an instrument for classifying competence according to a set criteria based on the various levels of learning outcome. It identifies the pillars of procurement capability as well as the training topics and learning outcomes that should be achieved in any session for public procurement practitioners at the various functional levels. It is intended to serve as a central reference that will allow executive management as well as HR professionals to better understand and assess the competencies across the 3 levels of procurement capacity as previously mentioned by Samantha. The certification requirements identify the desirable academic qualifications, level, and duration of experience that corresponds with each competence level. So currently, the OPR is in consultation with the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago, ACTT, to have this standard utilized in the accreditation of public procurement programs. It is hoped that once education and training providers utilize the standard, and of note here, we do have a session with education and training providers tomorrow, when developing their programs on public procurement, as well as ACTT utilizing this standard in its accreditation process. Public procurement practitioners will have available to them locally accredited programs that conform to best practice, which is hoped to improve the quality, portability, and articulation of national qualifications in public procurement. So this slide identifies the pillars of procurement capability. So we start from the left, highlighted in orange is the procurement leadership and governance pillar. In green, we have both significant procurement planning as well as managing supply. In red, we have performance management, and in blue, we have people. So the competencies are broadly placed into 2 categories, being procurement-specific competencies, which encompass the competencies necessary at each stage of the public procurement life cycle. They are derived from the knowledge and skills required from your workforce, your public procurement workforce, to perform the main task and activities of a performance stage. And 2, soft competencies, which represent the soft skills your professionals should have in order to master specific competencies. The competencies categorized under each pillar I mentioned before will be further expounded in my upcoming slides. So in an effort to promote a shared understanding amongst management and HR professionals of the expectations associated with the specific levels of competence of your procurement practitioners, as well as to establish a continuum of learning outcomes at the various competency levels, managers as well as HR professionals should make use of the framework as a foundational base when you are developing or assessing your public procurement practitioners. The framework infrastructure is intended to impose the minimum requirements for access to procurement functions and is a comprehensive structure that provides an elaborate foundation for the knowledge, skills, and attributes needed for your procurement professionals. So, starting from the left, at the basic competency levels, a practitioner must be able to demonstrate basic factual knowledge and awareness of the procurement field, basic practical skills required to use relevant information in order to carry out tasks and activities of the public procurement processes, as well as at a basic level, they must be able to perform quality work and acquire new skills under direct supervision and within a structured context. A basic level practitioner should possess, and we are under the levels of competency defined and described, 3 years related work experience in a procurement role whilst undergoing continuous training, and a diploma in business management or a related field. Now, recommendations in this area we would have highlighted in red deals specifically with our inclusion of Level 4 Diploma in Procurement and Supply Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, that's CIPS, and or equivalent certification, which would be an asset. So the recommendations are to develop a set of pathways for learning which recognizes the diversity of individuals who undertake procurement across governments and the degree to which they have the knowledge and expertise in procurement, as well as the scope of qualifications highlighted in red be extended and be more permissive as it is the early stages and not so many procurement officials will possess these combinations of qualifications. So we now invite you to present your comments in the chat on the highlighted areas if your procurement professionals actually do possess both these requirements or if you think it might be too restrictive based on your current complement of staff. So we proceed to the intermediate competency level. At this level, your practitioners should be able to demonstrate factual and theoretical knowledge of public procurement and related fields, a range of cognitive and practical skills required to use relevant information in order to carry out recurring procurement tasks and solve simple to complex problems, and the ability to carry out the public procurement process and tasks with little supervision. So at the intermediate level, a practitioner should possess at least 5 years executing procurement of high risk, high value, and a first degree in management or a related field, as well as level 6 diploma in CIPS or equivalent procurement certification. Again, the recommendation here is that a set of pathways should be enabled to encourage diverse individuals who undertake procurement currently to be included under this framework, as well as the area highlighted in red be extended and be more permissive. So we invite your comments on this area as well. At the advanced competency level, your practitioners should be able to demonstrate that they have advanced practical and theoretical knowledge of public procurement, advanced practical skills required to tackle more complex and less frequent tasks, and to solve problems using innovative methods and approaches. They must be able to take responsibility and ownership for completing of public procurement tasks. They must be able to manage inputs by other procurement specialists, and they must be able to take key decisions at different stages of the public procurement process. An advanced practitioner should possess at least 8 years progressive experience executing strategic procurement activities of high risk, high value, as well as a postgraduate degree in procurement, supply chain management, or a related field. Now, a recommendation coming from our session with your named procurement officers yesterday would have indicated that the advanced level should include an alternative of MSIPs. So that can also be a discussion we have during the Q&A. So pillar 1, procurement leadership and governance. This pillar deals with the coordination and management of the procurement function. There are 6 main elements that comprise this pillar, and they include policy and procedures governing procurement, types and levels of authority, location and reporting lines for the procurement function, procurement's business horizon, scope of influence of the procuring entity's spend, as well as transaction management. So the legislative framework for public procurement is the first competence that we will discuss today. And this competence provides your practitioners with a knowledge and understanding of the legislative framework that currently governs public procurement in Trinidad and Tobago. They need to understand and be able to apply the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act as amended, the regulations, the handbook and guidelines, as well as the principles of accountability, integrity, transparency, value for money, efficiency, fairness, and equity, as well as understand its implications on the public procurement function. So the legislative framework, it sets out the fundamental rules and behaviors and standards applicable to the procurement function. Your practitioners must understand and they must know how to effectively implement these, as it is crucial for compliance, it's crucial to ensure delivery of the best value for money, as well as a successful achievement of your organization's policy and objectives. At the basic level, they must have knowledge and awareness of the legislative framework, as well as they must know the relevant policies and procedures under which they operate, as these determine what they can and cannot do. So in a nutshell, your basic level practitioner should be able to monitor developments in the national legislation to support the organization's procurement decisions. Basically, they must be able to justify the decision based on legislation, and they must be able to apply procurement procedures in line with the legal framework as well as best practice. At the intermediate level, your practitioners must have a working knowledge of the legislation. They should be capable of applying this knowledge and working independently whilst ensuring compliance and good practice. They must also be capable of understanding risk assessments to understand and determine hindrances to their compliance. So in a nutshell, they should understand the implications and impact of procurement law on the procurement system as well as the supply chain, make procurement decisions in line with policy requirements and provide clear advice and solutions, as well as they should be able to perform research and analysis of the impact of the Act and the regulations, the handbooks and guidelines on procurement. At the advanced level, your practitioners should have an in-depth knowledge and experience capable of applying this knowledge at a strategic level. They should understand how public procurement is regulated in Trinidad and Tobago, understand the implications as well as the impact of procurement law on the procurement system as well as the supply chain. They must be able to understand and both navigate adjacent legislation to public procurement, such as competition law, contract, environmental, social, as well as intellectual property rights. They must be able to identify and rely on relevant case laws to make decisions during the procurement process, as well as they should be able to, at advanced level, design systems, tools, and procedures that promote compliance with rules and procedures. So for each competence, what I will highlight will be one knowledge and one skill-based question. So the knowledge question captures the knowledge your practitioner must have in public procurement against the expected competence level set for that individual's job profile. And the skill question captures the range of skills your practitioner will need to possess, and this will be compared against the expected skills for the competency level. So for the legislative framework competency, one knowledge question could be, how well do you know the legislation on public procurement and other relevant areas of law? An associated skill question, to what extent are you able to apply specific aspects of the procurement legislation as well as other legal frameworks that impact public procurement? So competency 2 deals with governance and compliance. Now your practitioners with this knowledge will be able to develop, apply, and adhere to the applicable procedure rules, tools, codes, and guidance documents which governs a public body's day-to-day procurement activities. Public procurement stakeholders must ensure compliance with all applicable rules, code of conduct, and guidelines and adhere to the objectives of the Act that I would have mentioned earlier. All stakeholders involved in public procurement must ensure verification throughout the full range of procurement tasks, from planning to management to contract to closeout, make use of available tools to assess the risk of conflict of interest, corruption on the one hand, and anti-competitive practices by suppliers and contractors such as collusion and bid rigging, or potential problems with compliance in your work on the other hand. So this competency involves the rules and conduct and controls on public practitioners' behavior. So they may be legislative, contractual, industry standards, or other policies that obligate your response as a public body. So practitioners operating at the basic level should be able to adopt ethical and professional behavior in line with industry as well as your organization's code of conduct and ethical standards. They must also be able to demonstrate a compliance mindset when they are preparing procurement deliverables. At the intermediate level, your practitioners should be able to actively monitor adherence to compliance requirements with the ability to make recommendations for improvement to ensure said compliance. They should also be able to use specific tools for prevention of fraud, corruption, and conflict of interest in tender evaluations, such as self-declaration forms. They must be able to, at the intermediate level, detect violations of ethical and compliance policies, as well as consult with legal and other relevant subject matter experts when in doubt about compliance-related policies within their organization. At the advanced level, your practitioners should understand the key ethical principles and must be able to act with a high standard of integrity. They must be able to lead and promote your code of conduct and ethical standards among staff, both internal and external to the procurement department. They must be able to create a code of ethic or conduct for your public body, review and monitor procurement projects, as well as ensure supply chain processes are compliant with both national and international ethical policies, as well as provide practical recommendations for improving adherence with your organization's compliance and regulatory policies. So the knowledge question highlighted under this competency: how well do you know your organization's procedural rules and principles, as well as tools, codes, and guidance documents that ensure adherence? A skill question to assess their competence. To what extent are you able to ensure compliance with applicable public procurement rules, principles, as well as ethical standards? So we go into internal controls and procurement capability. Now, public procurement takes place at an intersection of both public and private interests. It is subjected to several layers of internal and external oversight, which include media attention, and it is widely identified as a key risk area for both fraud and corruption. A major part of your professional's job as procurement practitioners would be to manage these overlying risks. This would require your professionals to rigorously and thoroughly apply mitigation measures and controls, as well as adopt proactive approaches to protecting the interests of both your organization and balancing that with the public good. So this competence requires knowledge of the functions of both internal control as well as knowledge of audit from a procurement point of view. So internal controls we must mention here are among the most critical controls your organization must establish for its procurement process. So any practitioner which operates at the basic level should understand that procurement is open to risk. Risks such as corruption and fraud, and they must be able to contribute to their identification. They should understand the importance and the use of the internal controls in the procurement function, as well as the use of mitigating strategies to prevent breaches of internal control processes. So this competence requires that basic practitioners understand the concept of accountability and liability within their organization. At the intermediate level, your practitioners must understand the importance and use of internal controls in procurement, but they also have an additional responsibility in carrying out internal control activities to support the achievement of the procurement objectives, as well as to ensure management directives to mitigate risk to the achievement of these objectives. They must be able to demonstrate a commitment to monitoring the efficacy of its procurement processes by applying and tailoring internal control processes to their procurement function. At the advanced level, they have a greater responsibility of assessing effectiveness of an internal control system within your organization. So your advanced level practitioners should be able to develop and implement advanced control processes and tools at both the operational and strategic levels. They should be able to incorporate lessons learned from previous risks detected to both enhance and strengthen your organization's internal control procedures, and they should be able to suggest improvements to the internal control system for their procurement activities. So under this competence of internal control, the knowledge question we will identify will be, how well do you know as a procurement practitioner audit and control functions? The skill question, to what extent are you able to carry out the different functions of inspection, control, and evaluation applicable to the public procurement function? So we delve into the competency for electronic procurement. E-procurement and other IT systems and tools support the procurement lifecycle, from the publication of tender opportunities to the final payment to suppliers and contractors. E-procurement as well as related IT systems and tools reduce administrative burden, they improve efficiency and strengthen the transparency and accountability of procurement procedures. The digital transformation of public procurement, however, requires continuous proactive approach to take advantage of the best available tools, as well as it requires the continuous training of your public procurement professionals. So technology has made purchasing easier. It's made it cheaper. It's made it more accountable through streamlined electronic procurement, which has a digital and electronic trail recorded at every level of transaction in your public procurement processes. So at the basic level, your practitioner should be able to operate basic IT tools as well as perform basic operations using available procurement systems and tools such as uploading of data, and they should be able to collect and centralize required template documents, such as the template documents that are located on the OPR's website, to enable them to prepare tender documentation. At the intermediate level, your practitioners should be able to use the systems and tools available for supporting procurement processes and perform main e-procurement procedures, use template documents, use the OPR's procurement depository, as well as other public contract registers. They must be able to use the relevant procurement systems and tools in order to ensure the transparency of their public procurement process within your organization, as well as use available data from the systems in order to assess the risk of anti-competitive practices by suppliers and contractors, such as collusion. A practitioner at the advanced level, level 3, should be able to implement the use of a wide range of procurement systems and tools, analyze procurement data for budget monitoring and forecasting of upcoming procurements within your organization, identify inefficiencies in the organization use of systems and tools and make suggestions to you on improvements, ensure that all users have the appropriate access and training, as well as they must be able to act as a change management agent during the implementation of any newly adopted system or tool. So the knowledge question for the competency for e-procurement and other IT tools would be, or could be, how well do you know e-procurement and other IT systems and tools? And the skill-based question, to what extent are you able to use e-procurement and other IT system tools in conducting your public procurement function? So we go into an effective document management system. So this offers increased accountability and transparency, as well as it will help your organization achieve its compliance obligations under the legislation, as well as provide a reliable, legally feasible source of evidence of decision and actions taken by your public procurement practitioners over a period of time. So all practitioners, and this is based on the requirements of the Act, are required to maintain a record of public procurement proceedings as evidence of having followed the prescribed public procurement policies and procedures. These records will serve as an audit trail for the procurement proceedings, and as such, they must be accessible, they must be secure, they must be accurate, and always up to date. So this competency to enable compliance with the legislative requirements, a basic level practitioner must have knowledge of both the legal and regulatory reasons for managing documents in public procurement, as well as the importance of document management. They must be able to maintain your records in accordance with both your organization's established procedures as well as the legislation, as well as they must be able to preserve procurement records for review by the relevant stakeholders, such as the OPR. At the intermediate level, practitioners must have knowledge of evaluation techniques for measuring the effectiveness of the document management infrastructure within your organization. They must also be able to maintain records in accordance with your established regulatory requirements as well as internal procedures, ensuring that they are accessible, that your documents are secure, and that they are accurate. At the advanced level, your professionals must be capable of developing an effective document management system. They must have the ability to serve as an advisor and a coach to raise awareness of the importance and relevance of the procurement proceedings filed, and they must be able to establish appropriate safeguards to protect the integrity of all the organization's procurement records. So a knowledge question under this competence. How well does your procurement professional know the techniques of document management and the features of a document management system? A skill question. To what extent is your professional capable of using document management systems as well as tools? Use of standardized forms. This competency underpins the principles of transparency and efficiency by reducing administrative burden, ensuring equal access to information for both your organization as well as suppliers and contractors, as well as reducing the potential for inconsistent practices within your public body. Of note, the OPR has approximately 10 standardized templates published on its website for use by public bodies. We go on to the levels of procurement capacity. So at the basic level, your practitioner must be aware of the standardized forms available for low-risk, low-value procurement, as well as they must be capable of completing these forms as required with guidance from their senior. At the intermediate level, your practitioner must understand as well as have the ability to complete standardized forms for high-risk, high-value procurement. They must also be capable of providing guidance to stakeholders in the use of these forms. They must also be capable of identifying any shortcomings in the forms, the templates, as well as recommendations for improvements for these templates. At the advanced level, they must have in-depth knowledge, as well as they must be capable of developing standardized forms for your organization. They must be able to sensitize and train both internal and external stakeholders in the use of these standardized forms. They must also monitor compliance with the approved standardized forms for your organization, assess the shortcomings identified in the forms, and approve modifications in consultation with all relevant stakeholders, which will include the OPR. A knowledge question for this competency. How well does your procurement practitioner know the use of standardized forms for procurement? And to what extent, in terms of a skill question, to what extent is your procurement practitioner able to complete the technical fields in these standard forms? So practical issues in procurement. It is important for your procurement practitioners to understand the practical issues that exist in public procurement based on case law, experience, and best practice. So at the basic level, your practitioner should be able to conduct research into best practices for the improvement of the procurement process, as well as they should be able to understand the common issues that exist in public procurement. At the intermediate level, your practitioner should be capable of providing advice and implementing mechanisms to prevent practical issues in procurement, such as the shift of traditional procurement focus from short-term cost savings to value for money as required by the legislation, as well the lack of transparency within the organization's functions, and so on. Now, at the advanced level, this practitioner should be able to lead the development and implementation of mechanisms to prevent common procurement issues from occurring, while simultaneously ensuring compliance with procurement-related legislation and regulations in order to avoid challenges to your organization due to procurement actions. Additionally, at the advanced level, your officer should have expert knowledge and must understand the practical issues that exist in procurement, as well as they must have good working knowledge of case law. So, a knowledge-based question for this competence: how well does your practitioner know the practical issues that exist in public procurement? As well as, to what extent, in terms of a skill question, to what extent is your practitioner able to identify and address practical issues in public procurement? So we go into pillar 2, significant procurement planning. So procurement planning has two aspects: planning how to manage the total portfolio of significant procurement and disposal actions within an organization, as well as the planning for individual categories of goods and services. Pillar 3 deals with managing supply, and managing supply focuses on how well supply arrangements are managed over their life to optimize performance and realize expected benefits. The elements that include that comprise this pillar include the procedures for managing various types of supply arrangements, consultation and information sharing with suppliers, understanding of the procuring entity's status in major supply markets, collaboration between procurement and your requester, that's your user department, and practices for negotiating and dealing with suppliers and contractors. So the formulation, development, and implementation of procurement planning translate the policy choices of your organization into where and how procurement should be used to cost effectively purchase your required supplies, services, or works in line with the desired policy impact. So this competence requires knowledge of the procurement planning and policy priorities of your organization, including budget plans and options for implementation, as well as relevant policies at a national level. The design of the procurement strategy is the deliberate use of different elements in the procurement life cycle to reflect and exploit the conditions of the subject matter of the procurement, as well as to define the most appropriate and impactful processes in order to reach the organization's objectives and to ensure genuine competition is achieved. It includes the identification of the most appropriate option between types of procurement methods, standalone or joint procurement, features of the procedure such as scope, duration, and division into lots, techniques and instruments for electronic submission. So this will deal with e-auction as well as catalogs and dynamic purchasing systems, and types of contracts, for instance, direct or framework agreements, as well as contract performance clauses. So this competence requires the knowledge of the range of available procurement strategies and their components, for example, in terms of choice and features of the procedures, instruments for submission, types of contract, which all correlate in order to reach the organization's objectives. So at the basic level, under this competence, your practitioner should be able to perform basic planning tasks, such as consolidating contributions from various departments. They should be able to implement the procurement planning in their daily work. They should understand commonly used procurement procedures, techniques for electronic submission, as well as contract types. They should be able to support research on the procurement procedures, techniques, and instruments for procurement strategy, as well as they should be able to provide input to support the procurement strategy decision-making process. For example, they should be able to summarize and report information gathered on procurement options. At the intermediate level, your practitioner should be able to provide research and gather input for the procurement planning in line with the policy and political goals of your organization, help implement the organization's procurement planning in line with the budget and timeline, ensure that their daily work aligns with and contributes to the procurement planning in line with your policy priorities, as well as they should be able to understand the various steps within a procurement strategy, gather information necessary to make data-driven procurement strategy decisions and recommendations, as well as make effective use of the whole range of procurement procedures, techniques for electronic submission, contract types, as well as contract performance clauses where appropriate. At the advanced level, your practitioner should be able to coordinate the preparation of your organization's procurement plan, as well as make recommendations for final planning and timelines. They should be able to anticipate potential opportunities as well as challenges and mitigate risk in the implementation process. They should monitor implementation of the plan to ensure success of your organizational policy. They should provide feedback to policymakers on the implementation of the plan where requested, make suggestions for the use of various procurement procedures and techniques in order to design the procurement strategy, oversee the research and analysis process, as well as make the final decisions on the most appropriate procurement process, ensure that the right resources are available for the research and analysis processes, use the results of their market analysis and assess and take action to mitigate any risk of any anti-competitive behaviors by suppliers which are linked to the various options, as well as they should be able to decide on the design of the procurement strategy using the full range of procurement procedures and techniques. So a knowledge question as it pertains to procurement planning competence. How well does your practitioner know your organization's procurement planning policies, priorities, and budgets? A skill question for the procurement planning competence. To what extent is your practitioner able to develop a procurement plan according to available budget resources? A knowledge question for the strategy developed competence. How well does your practitioner know the different procurement strategies, such as procedure types? Can they utilize lots? And what type of contracts are they aware of? A skill question. To what extent is your practitioner able to determine, among the range of available procurement strategies, the one that best fits to the procurement at stake whilst reaching the organization's objectives? So we go into market analysis. And this competence provides an in-depth view of which supplies and services can or cannot be provided by the market and under what conditions. It involves collecting information on key market drivers, for example, political, environmental, technological, and social, as well as collecting information on potential bidders. The information is then used to define the procurement strategy. For instance, if you are to divide your procurement into lots, the reference price, and the selection and award criteria to better advance the organization's objectives. So the competence requirements for this area would be knowledge of market analysis techniques and tools that can be used to understand the characteristics of the supplier market, as well as the market conditions and trends in order to define the procurement strategy. So at the basic level, your practitioner should be able to apply principles of transparency, non-discrimination, and equal treatment, as well as ethical, privacy, confidentiality, and integrity standards to market consultations carried out by your organization. They must be able to collect information from available sources without engaging suppliers to support market assessment on straightforward requirements, as well as they must be able to prepare supporting documentation. At the advanced level, practitioners should be able to apply the principles of non-discrimination, transparency, and equal treatment, as well as ethical and integrity standards to their market consultations. They should be able to analyze and interpret market research, as well as estimate costs and forecast budgets. And they should be able to evaluate the potential impact of market forces using relevant tools. At the advanced level, practitioners should be able to review market analysis and ensure completeness, undertake market research on complex organizational needs in line with principles, identify market opportunities, as well as propose mitigation measures to any risk they may identify. They should be able to set up processes for enabling a relevant number of suppliers to take part in their market consultations, as well as their competitive dialogue procedures. They should be able to ensure the procurement strategies are designed to reflect actual market conditions, policy goals, and any opportunities identified. And they should be able to identify genuine competition in the case of limited market offers, either due to the number of active suppliers or the nature of the supply or service. So, a knowledge question for your practitioners under the market analysis competence. And market analysis will also involve engagement of the market. So how well does your practitioner know market analysis tools, as well as appropriate market engagement techniques? And a skill question: to what extent is your practitioner able to use market analysis and market engagement techniques to understand the characteristics and trends of the supplier markets? So at this point, I will hand you over to Ms. Roy, who will introduce our break.
Thank you so much, Marisa. Okay, so participants, at this time, we will take a 15-minute break to allow you to digest the information that was just shared and to refresh yourselves a bit. We will place a timer on the screen, so we'll all be working with the same clock. We will resume at 10:36. Thank you very much. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We will now go through part 2 of the Competence Framework and Certification Requirement for Protocol. So I welcome back Ms. Marisa De La Rosa, our Head Procurement Capacity Development, to take you through this presentation, after which we will have a short poll so that you can participate. Marisa?
Welcome back to all participants. So we will begin at the category management competency. So category specific expertise is at the core of the procurement procedure.
Instead of writing the thing.
Okay, hi again, sorry for that. Just a response to Gemma Piljohn. So Jenna, we will be sharing the presentation at the conclusion of this session, as well as the recording will be available on the OPR's website at the end of the week. So you will be able to have that information. Yes. So, based on the characteristics of the category of supply, services, or works to be acquired, your practitioner will need to understand category management. And this will include them involving experts as well as stakeholders, both professional and end users. The procurement strategy and documents have to be tailored to fulfill the identified need and maximize value for money. So under this category, this competence of category management, it requires the practitioners to have knowledge of the features and specificities relevant to one or more categories of supplies, services, or works that your organization procures, including suppliers, technical parameters, as well as market conditions. At the basic level of competence for category management, your practitioner must be able to perform research as well as provide relevant information on a category of supplies, services, or works to make more informed purchasing decisions. Practitioners who operate at the intermediate level within organizations should be able to contribute to the definition of product technical requirements in preparing technical specifications. They must be able to prepare detailed category management strategies as well as undertake strategic analyses, which would include the definition of categories, as well as they should be able to develop and inform category management plans, as well as the management of category programs. At the advanced level, your practitioner should be able to either arrange or categorize planned spending according to market trends. They must also keep in mind quality, risk, and cost conduct, as well as conduct a spend analysis. They should be able to promote the benefits of category management to senior stakeholders within your organization, as well as influence and manage stakeholders as it pertains to category management. They should be able to implement category strategy as well as continuous improvements based on the different categories they would have identified. So a knowledge question for your practitioners as it pertains to assessing the competence of category management. How well does your practitioner know the features and specificities of one or more specific categories of supplies, services, or works that your organization procures? A skill question. To what extent is your practitioner able to get the most out of one or more categories of supplies, services, or works procured by your organization? So the competence of collaborative purchasing. So no procurement officer works in isolation. To be successful, your professionals need to collaborate with each other as well as their environment. This means that they must be capable of working in teams as well as encourage the sharing of ideas and strategies and the gathering of input and expertise amongst their counterparts in other public bodies. So collaborative purchasing is simply a means to deliver greater efficiencies through combined purchasing power. And with public bodies currently under pressure to deliver more for less, collaborating purchasing is an innovative tool that has to become embedded in your public procurement process. So your practitioners who operate at a basic level, they must be able or they must have a sound knowledge of collaborative procurement strategies, and they must be capable of identifying goods, works, and services that can be acquired through collaborative purchasing with other public bodies. At the intermediate level, your practitioner must be capable of establishing arrangements to utilize collaborative purchasing strategies, example through committees with both internal and external stakeholders. They must be able to develop a schedule of items and a plan for implementation of the collaborative purchasing strategy. A practitioner operating at the intermediate level must also be capable of identifying as well as mitigating potential risk and recommending to senior management courses of action to resolve these risks. At the advanced level, your practitioner must possess expert knowledge in managing collaborative purchasing as well as the associated complexities. They must also be able to provide advice with respect to high-risk, high-value procurement, while simultaneously ensuring that appropriate agreements and approvals have been sought. So a knowledge question in terms of assessing the competence of collaborative purchasing within your organization. How well does your procurement practitioner know about collaborative purchasing tools and techniques? And a skill question, to what extent is your practitioner able to utilize collaborative purchasing tools and techniques to enhance the effectiveness of purchasing as well as add value to your organization? So the competence for pre-qualification. And pre-qualification is simply the process used prior to solicitation to identify, qualify suppliers or contractors who can be invited by your practitioner to submit tenders or proposals to provide goods, works, or services. So at the basic level, your practitioner must be able to understand the pre-qualification requirements specified in the legislation, as well as the use of the office's procurement depository. They should also be able to assist in reviewing suppliers or contractors' provisions for pre-qualification. At the intermediate level, a practitioner should be able to assess the financial capacity as well as the technical competence of suppliers or contractors based on the pre-qualification record on the OPR's procurement depository. They should be able to undertake due diligence checks in keeping with the information gathered on the said depository, as well as the requirements of the Act highlighted at Section 29. Your advanced level practitioners, they must be able to lead the pre-qualification process for suppliers and contractors within the particular sector. And they must be able to conduct a pre-selection exercise in collaboration with subject matter experts. So a knowledge question for assessing your procurement practitioner. How well does your procurement practitioner know the due diligence requirements of Section 29 of the Act? And a skill question. To what extent does the procurement practitioner able to utilize the procurement depository to conduct a pre-qualification process? So the competence of requisitioning and requirements definition. Now, drafting technical specifications involves transforming the findings of the needs assessment and market analysis processes into concrete specifications and evaluation criteria that can be used in assessing bids and awarding the contract. This includes setting objective and not over-prescriptive minimum requirements for the subject matter to avoid unnecessarily limiting competition. Ensuring that technical specifications are outcome-focused and future-proof is key to enable innovation as well as continuous improvement. So when drafting of technical specifications, your practitioners should already define the exclusion, selection, and award criteria, which will be used to evaluate the offers in order to satisfy the most economically advantageous tender requirements. Technical specifications can also contain references to standards in order to ensure common understanding, transparency, and equal treatment. So this competence requires the knowledge of drafting technical specifications that enable potential bidders to submit realistic offers that directly address the underlying need of your organization. So in order to carry or draft technical specifications at the basic level, your practitioner must be able to contribute to the preparation of clear technical specifications, as well as adapt standardized or previously used tender specifications to the current needs of the particular procurement. At the intermediate level, your practitioner must be capable of collecting information and analyses on technical content to support the specification development, apply the selection award criteria, as well as understand your organization's influence on the market, ensure that the technical specifications being drafted are compliant with the principles of public procurement obligations such as accessibility, as well as the relevant sector-specific legal requirements. They must be able to make use of non-price criteria for routine procurement procedures, including appropriate weighting to ensure best price-quality balance. They must also be able to make references to standards to increase common understanding of procurement documents between buyers and suppliers, and engage with experts to understand technological roadmaps and will support the drafting of technical specifications for innovation. Now, at the advanced level, your practitioner should be able to draft specifications that take advantage of evolving markets and keep pace with changing needs, liaise with relevant colleagues and services to gather advanced technological knowledge for drafting of their technical specifications. They must be able to define the selection and award criteria to deliver value for money with an understanding of the market implications as well as legal requirements for the potential use of standards in the drafting of their specifications, provide guidance on drafting technical specifications to other team members of the procurement department, as well as understand and incorporate technology roadmaps when drafting of the technical specifications. So the knowledge question to assess the competence of your practitioner under this area: how well does your practitioner know the requirements of drafting technical specifications? Skill question: to what extent is your practitioner able to draft technical specifications that enable potential bidders to submit realistic offers that address your organizational need? The selection of procurement methods competence. Public procurement methods are the procedures used for selecting suppliers, contractors, and service providers from which your organization will obtain goods, works, or services. So at the basic level, in order to complete this competence, your practitioner should have knowledge of the various procurement methods, as well as they must possess the ability to select and justify the selection of appropriate procurement methods for low-risk, low-value procurement activities. At the intermediate level, your practitioner should be able to utilize historical data on similar high-risk, high-value procurements to determine the appropriate procurement method and technique to be used for high-risk, high-value procurement activities, as well as provide justifications for their decision. At the advanced level, your practitioner should be able to recommend and approve the appropriate procurement method, as well as the contract type based on requirement definition and market analysis to ensure best practice and in keeping with the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act, as well as the regulations. They must also be able to provide guidance on complex procurement methods and their application, while simultaneously ensuring that abuse and corruption are not introduced into the process. So a knowledge question for assessing this competence would be: how well does your practitioner know the selection of procurement methods, processes, tools, and techniques? A skill question: to what extent is your practitioner able to select the appropriate procurement method to ensure efficiency and value for money is achieved pursuant to the Act? So this competence basically requires knowledge of the different types of risk in public procurement, as well as mitigation measures, functions of internal control, as well as audit from the procurement point of view. So for the risk management competence, at the basic level, Your practitioner must be able to understand that procurement is open to risk, such as fraud and corruption, as well as contribute to the identification. They must be able to gather information and undertake risk assessments utilizing appropriate tools such as SUPREM, as well as prepare risk management registers for low-risk, low-value procurements. At the intermediate level, your practitioner must be able to assess your organization's risk appetite, as well as provide recommendations to all internal stakeholders. They should be able to both develop and implement appropriate procurement strategies to address bottlenecks and unique procurement requirements, as well as they should be able to prepare risk management registers for high-risk, high-value procurements that your organization will be undertaking. At the advanced level, your practitioner must be able to proactively manage risks to add value to the procurement activities, implement advanced risk management processes, as well as integrate the inputs from risk assessment exercise as inputs for designing procurement strategies and policies, as well as they must be able to fully integrate risk management processes into governance and operational procurement systems within your organization, using established channels of communication with both competition and anti-corruption authorities. So a knowledge question for assessing the risk management competence of your practitioner. How well does your practitioner know audit risk management tools and techniques? Skill question. To what extent is your practitioner able to monitor risk closely, as well as apply mitigation measures and proactive approaches to protect the interests of your organization? Strategic sourcing. So strategic sourcing allows businesses to consolidate their purchasing power to achieve the lowest possible total cost of ownership, as well as to minimize risk to the supply chain. So at a basic level, your practitioner should have sound knowledge of market factors in the development of the strategic sourcing process, and they must be capable of evaluating the market factors to assist in the development of appropriate strategic sourcing plans. At the intermediate level, your practitioner should be able to undertake a strategic assessment of key suppliers or contractors using modeling techniques of analysis, as well as assess the sourcing options for the supply of goods, works, and services, and determine the capabilities of suppliers, contractors prior to commitment. At the advanced level, your practitioner should be able to manage a cross-functional team and consult with internal stakeholders to agree on sourcing options for specific categories of purchases, and develop category plans to define the approaches to be taken to sourcing categories and communicate these to stakeholders. A knowledge question for assessing your practitioner's strategic sourcing competence. How well does your practitioner know the difference or the different strategic sourcing steps, processes, and strategies? A skill question. To what extent is your practitioner able to apply strategic sourcing principles to reduce the total cost of ownership and minimize risk within the supply chain? At this point, I would like to hand over to Tamara to administer a short poll on what we have delved into thus far.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will soon, on the screen, you will soon see the question that we would like you to answer. Given the information covered At what competency level do you think your named procurement officer is at this time? So we just want to encourage you to please be as honest as possible, because this information would be useful feedback for us in terms of going forward. All right, so we've come to the end of the poll now. We got 34 responses. Okay, 35, it's going up. All right, so and the results are 51% of you responded basic, 29% responded intermediate, and 20% responded advanced. So at this time, we will go into our second break for another 15 minutes. And the reason why we are giving you these breaks is that because we do understand that the content is a bit heavy, and we want to give you all some time to refresh and digest and so on. So we will resume at 11:19 a.m. See you soon. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Hope you are refreshed and ready to continue going. So at this time, we will now cover part 3 and 4 of the competency framework and certification requirements of procurement. So to conduct this presentation, or to continue conducting this presentation, will be Marisa De La Rosa, our head procurement capacity development. Marisa?
Good morning, all participants. I thank you for staying with us. We know this is a lot of information, but we must take you through the competency requirements for your procurement practitioners. So I will take you through the rest of the competency framework, continuing with the preparation of solicitation documents. So to launch a procurement procedure, solicitation documentation has to be prepared by your procurement practitioner, and these must include exclusion, selection, and award criteria which make up the basis for the contract award decision. The tender documentation explains the administrative requirements of the procedure, it justifies the estimated value of the contract, and it specifies the terms and conditions under which suppliers and contractors are to be submitted, evaluated, and awarded. So this competence requires the knowledge of the content of the tender documentation, including the exclusion, selection, and award criteria that are the basis for the contract award decision. And this is required in order to run a successful procurement procedure. So at the basic level, your practitioners must be able to support the preparation of procurement documents, such as instructions to tenderers, annexes to be completed, draft contracts, which all must be based on guidelines and available templates. They must also be able to ensure the quality of the tender documentation process by applying the right methodology and standards. At the intermediate level, your practitioners must be able to draft procurement documentation in line with the organizational policy, national regulations, as well as OPR's handbooks and guidelines. They must be able to publish tender announcements and respond to supplier contractors' questions about tender documentation requirements. They must also be able to design both standard and non-standard contract terms in collaboration with legal advisors. And they should be able to verify the compliance and completeness of the procurement documentation they have prepared. At the advanced level, your practitioner must be able to design and complete tender documentation that reflects policy goals, as well as assist in maximizing value for money. Make sure the correct methodology is applied to be issued to public procurement tenders. They should be able to foresee and tackle risks linked to financial and legal aspects of concerned documents. as well as endorse final documentation and other management decisions related to that particular procurement process. So, a knowledge question to assess your practitioner's competence in terms of the preparation of solicitation documents. How well does your practitioner know the requirements of preparing a solicitation document? A skill question. To what extent is your practitioner able to prepare procurement documentation, including the appropriate exclusion, selection, and award criteria? Evaluation and negotiation competencies. So the submission evaluation process must ensure that tenders are assessed in an objective and legally compliant way against the exclusion, selection, and award criteria that would have been defined by your procurement practitioners in your solicitation documents. The selected evaluation committee should be led by experienced administrators who are well versed in their roles, responsibilities, and procedural obligations, supported by relevant technical experts in the field of the subject matter. The evaluation process should be documented to provide evidence and the rationale for the award decision. So this competence requires your practitioner to have knowledge of the appropriate evaluation process, depending on the type of procurement procedure, including the roles and responsibilities of the evaluation committee, and this is to ensure that all tenders are assessed in an objective and transparent way against your predefined criteria. As it pertains to negotiation, negotiations can be used to secure and advance the interests of your organization in achieving best value for money. This competence requires knowledge of negotiation strategies during the procurement phases and contract management in accordance with public procurement principles. So practitioners at the basic level, they must be able to support the evaluation process, including the preparation of documentation for the evaluation committee. They must be able to manage tender documentation, including receipt of offers as well as archiving. They should be able to participate in the assessment of tenders and ensure that the process is documented. Perform basic tasks related to the negotiation process, and support the negotiation process with analysis and input gathering. At the intermediate level, your practitioner should be able to perform evaluation against the defined criteria, as well as make recommendations to support the award decision making. They should be able to participate as a voting member in the evaluation committee for high-level, high-risk contracts. They should be able to detect possible cases of anti-competitive and corrupt behavior, such as collusion among suppliers and contractors based on the tender submission. They should be able to prepare and provide feedback to all tenderers, as well as document the evaluation process used to rank the offers in order to ensure proper reporting and auditing trail. They should also be able to prepare negotiation strategies as well as attend and actively participate in negotiation meetings. The advanced level practitioner should be able to chair evaluation committees for most types of procedures, ensure that the evaluation process is conducted in a way that is consistent, transparent, and fair, ensure that the number, skills, and knowledge of the evaluation panel members are appropriate and that they are all free of conflict of interest, communicate the outcomes of the evaluation panel to stakeholders, prepare negotiation strategies. They should be able to elaborate the organization's negotiation positions, attend negotiations, as well as solve complex issues that arise from different types of procurement and contracts. And they should be able to run the majority of negotiations for your organization's high complexity projects. So a knowledge question to assess your practitioner as it relates to the evaluation competence. How well does your procurement practitioner know the evaluation process? A skill question. To what extent is your practitioner able to evaluate offers against predefined criteria in an objective and transparent way? A knowledge question to evaluate your practitioner's negotiation competence. How well does your procurement practitioner know negotiation processes that are relevant in public procurement? And a skill question. To what extent is your practitioner able to apply negotiation processes, strategies during the procurement phases and contract management in accordance with public procurement principles, as well as maintaining ethical standards? So, contract management. It involves ensuring that the subject of the procurement is delivered according to the terms and conditions in the technical specifications, as well as the draft contract, and as well as compliance with all legal requirements and technical specifications. In the case of supply contracts, contract management also covers logistics and inventory management. This means ensuring that goods are delivered on time and meet quality standards, and that the availability of stocks is consistent and cost effectively maintained. So to demonstrate this competence, your basic level practitioner should be able to gather data for contract implementation monitoring, update and maintain contract databases and registers pursuant to the procurement legislation, support contract delivery functions in line with scope, quality, time, and budget, report on contractual milestones and outcomes, as well as support inventory management and inform when issues with the logistics or with the inventory arises. At the intermediate level, your practitioner should be able to define and implement the contract management plan, monitor the performance of contracts against predefined KPIs, perform regular risk assessment on procurement contracts, apply the terms and conditions of contracts in varied circumstances, advise on any contract modifications, prepare the grounds for contract termination, apply corrective measures in cases of deviation from the contract terms, as well as apply first-hand experience with logistics and perform inventory management. At the advanced level, your practitioner must be able to manage a portfolio of contracts for the procurement of supplies, goods, and services, anticipate the implementation of the contract already during the pre-award phase to minimize contract modifications later on, adapt management practices in difficult situations, make a decision on contract termination, understand and provide advice on all aspects related to contract law and contract management strategies as it pertains to the procurement function, as well as tailor the logistics and inventory management for the delivery of complex goods to your organization. So a knowledge question to assess your practitioner's contract management competence. How well does your practitioner know the principles of contract management? A skill question. To what extent is your practitioner able to oversee contract implementation whilst ensuring compliance, technical compliance of the good work or service delivered? Supplier management involves building and maintaining effective relationships with both current and potential future suppliers of your organization, providing information, guidance, and potentially supporting and training of suppliers, for example, on the use of the e-procurement system, are efficient ways to achieve these objectives. Your procurement practitioners must also ensure that communication with suppliers and contractors during the tendering phase is in accordance with public procurement principles, that is non-discrimination, transparency, as well as equal treatment, and that they maintain ethical standards. So this competency requires knowledge of strategies and processes to develop and manage relationships with suppliers and contractors in accordance with best practice. At the basic level, your practitioner should be able to reply to simple queries from suppliers, as well as support the work of other procurement professionals in meetings and other communication with suppliers and contractors. At the intermediate level, your practitioner should be able to interact directly with suppliers on low complexity and high risk, high value contracts, advise suppliers and contractors on the conduct of e-procurement procedures. They should be able to monitor supplier performance, as well as identify trends and take necessary action, as well as develop sound working relationships with suppliers and contractors to ensure commitment, integrity, and an awareness of mutual obligations. At the advanced level, your practitioner should be able to maintain structured and strategic relationships with suppliers and contractors, provide support to suppliers and contractors, in particular on the use of e-procurement systems, analyze supplier trends and draw conclusions in terms of opportunities for improvement, handle cases of disputes with suppliers and contractors, as well as identify and foster ethical and economically advantageous supply chains. So a knowledge question to assess this competence: how well does your practitioner know supplier management strategies and processes? A skill question: to what extent is your practitioner able to develop, manage, and maintain relationships with suppliers and contractors while simultaneously respecting public procurement principles? So the performance management pillar, pillar 4, includes those competencies public procurement professionals need to have in order to increase value for money in public procurement proceedings. Procurement professionals need to focus their efforts and prioritize work to deliver value for money in line with both legislation and policy. Their role is to achieve cost savings and strategic and sustainable goals, proactively identify inefficiencies, overcome obstacles, and adapt their approach to consistently deliver high-performance procurement outcomes. So at the basic level, your practitioner should be able to manage time effectively and prioritize work to meet all deadlines, review and improve on their own performance, pursue individual goals with energy and persistence, setting high standards of performance, and develop a basic factual understanding of organizational drivers. At the intermediate level, practitioners must be able to set team goals that support organizational goals, such as KPIs and SMART targets. Keep the team focused by setting short and long-term action plans. Effectively manage team performance to achieve value for money results, and measure the extent to which targets has been achieved. Advanced level practitioners must be able to set goals that support performance and value for money targets, drive the procurement team to achieve standards and results in line with the values and missions of the organization, as well as monitor and analyze performance, including using statistical analysis techniques for setting new goals. So a knowledge question for assessing your practitioner's competence: how well does your practitioner know cost and performance management strategies and methods, as well as KPIs that help identify inefficiencies and monitor the financial performance of the procurement function and the way it delivers value for money? A skill question: to what extent is your practitioner able to apply commercial and performance management strategies and methods to maximize value for money of procurement contracts? Continuous improvement. Now, your procurement professionals need to respond and adapt to changing tasks and circumstances. Such changes can occur in terms of your working method, digitization, citizens' expectations, technical solutions and challenges, for instance, big data and cybersecurity, emergency situations such as the current pandemic, as well as natural disasters, and policy changes and challenges. Professionals must keep abreast of relevant changes in the regulatory, political, and technological environment of public procurement. They must keep an open mind to changing conditions, new ideas and viewpoints, as well as working methods. They must adapt, they must be resilient to change, and even embrace change by looking for modern and innovative solutions to overcome new procurement challenges. They should be capable of reassessing their own approach in emergency situations to ensure compliance whilst making full use of available flexibilities. They should also be able to identify learning and development opportunities that support agile adaptation to changes and new tools. So this competency requires knowledge of change management techniques as well as tools. A practitioner at the basic level should be able to identify effective procurement processes and practices, as well as accept new priorities positively and apply new tools and processes. At the intermediate level, your practitioner must be able to identify and practice ways of delivering value through effective and improved procurement processes, establish benchmarks for the public procurement function, set up forums and mechanisms for continuous feedback from both the organization's internal and external stakeholders, as well as implement new procurement techniques and approaches in line with the new procurement legislation. At the advanced level, your practitioner must be able to manage innovation and change efforts to maximize efficiency, effectiveness, speed of response, and adoption, adjust internal procedures and workflows according to the implemented change initiatives of your organization, prepare the procurement team and organization for dealing with, responding to, and adapting to any changes, as well as foster an environment conducive to innovation, learning and development, and ensure that learning and development needs of their department are addressed. So a knowledge question to assess this competence: how well does your practitioner know change management techniques and tools? A skill question: to what extent is your practitioner able to anticipate and accommodate to changing tasks and circumstances and aim to continuously learn and grow? And we proceed to pillar 5, the final pillar in the competency framework. So the people pillar comprise those competencies that enable public procurement professionals to interact and cooperate with other professionals and do so in the most professional manner. Stakeholder relationship management basically means creating and maintaining solid internal and external relations based on mutual trust and credibility. Your public procurement professional often needs to engage with stakeholders to achieve your organizational goals, as well as contribute to the sustainable development of stakeholder relationships. Therefore, this competence requires your practitioner to have knowledge of the key concepts and methods of stakeholder relationship management. At the basic level, your practitioner should be able to identify both internal and external stakeholders, as well as understand their needs, maintain good working relationships with external and internal stakeholders at an operational level, consider all stakeholders' points of view when analyzing problems and opportunities, as well as they should be able to seek solutions that balance the needs of various stakeholders and look for win-win solutions. At the intermediate level, your practitioner should be able to ensure stakeholder needs are heard and effectively addressed, develop a good working relationship and communication with internal and external stakeholders based on mutual trust, analyze potential positive and negative consequences to select the most appropriate stakeholder management methods, as well as build and manage relationships with subject matter stakeholders to ensure sustainability of your stakeholder strategies. At the advanced level, your practitioner should be able to leverage sound working relationships based on trust, commitment, and integrity, motivate both internal and external stakeholders in order to achieve the organization's desired outcomes, facilitate an environment where win-win solutions can actually be achieved, as work proactively to anticipate and mitigate potential stakeholder communication challenges, as well as develop and leverage strategic stakeholder relationships. A knowledge question to assess SRM competencies would be, how well does your practitioner know the key concepts and methods of stakeholder management? A skill question, to what extent is your practitioner able to create mutual trust that contributes to solid internal and external stakeholder relationships for your organization? And finally, the last competence, effective communication. So communication aims to ensure that the goals and processes of public procurement in general and individual procurement procedures are well understood by all stakeholders of your organization. It relies on the use of appropriate communication channels, whether oral, written, or electronic, in order to deliver relevant and accurate information in line with the public procurement principles of fairness, transparency, and equity. In doing so, your practitioner needs to adapt the communication medium and messages to their target audience. Therefore, this competence requires knowledge of communication tools and techniques and how the public procurement principles apply to various communication situations. At the basic level, your practitioner must be able to listen actively, speak and write clearly, logically, and concisely, ensure efficient release of information through various communication channels, as well as support the procurement team in designing clear and sound communication deliverables. At the intermediate level, practitioners should be able to use active listening and communication skills in conversations as well as meetings, prepare detailed and accurate communication deliverables to present procurement priorities through the organization communication strategies. At the advanced level, your practitioner should be excellent at delivering strategic, engaging, and persuasive communication with a consistent message around values and objectives, implement the organization's communication strategy in relation to specific procurement projects by defining the relevant deliverables, overseeing their design and delivery, as well as creating a structure that ensures a good flow of communication to both internal and external stakeholders. So a knowledge question for assessing your communication competence of the practitioner. How well does your practitioner know communication tools and techniques and how to apply the public procurement principles in various communication situations? The skill question, to what extent is your practitioner able to communicate effectively by adapting the communication medium and message to the target audience while ensuring public procurement principles are respected? So to all participants, thank you for your attention thus far. At this point, we would like to issue another poll that deals with just getting some information in terms of your organization as well as your procurement practitioners' readiness for full proclamation of the legislation.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we will now end the poll. We got 33 responses with 79% stating that they're not prepared and 21% stating that you are prepared. So we will be breaking for lunch now, and we give you 40 minutes to do that. and then we will return with our final item on the agenda that is going through the learning management system. So see you back in 40. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, participants. We are back. Hope you had a good lunch. So we're getting ready to close off now with our final presentation. We will be taking you through the OPR's learning management system. So to do that, Ms. Marisa De La Rosa, our Head of Procurement Capacity Development, will continue to share with you. Marisa?
Thank you, Tamara. Good afternoon again, participants. We will just engage in a brief introduction of the OPR's LMS. So the OPR is in the process of acquiring a learning management system that will provide a new learning experience for local and foreign suppliers, local public bodies, as well as we are utilizing it internally for staff of the OPR. So the intention is, in terms of establishing the learning management system, which will be available to named procurement officers within all public bodies, is basically to provide them with an interactive content learning experience that will relate to the Act, the regulations, the OPR's handbooks and guidelines, as well as procurement systems, policies, procedures, and processes. So once the acquisition of the LMS is complete, the OPR will send a request to MPOs within public bodies, and they will be provided with usernames and passwords to access the system and all its contents. So the idea is that we really want to revolutionize delivery of capacity building via our LMS platform. We envisage that the platform will transform our capacity building interventions by enabling us to better serve our stakeholders as we try to deliver mobile-friendly content that is accessible to NPOs on demand, which will improve availability. So we really want to develop a workforce with future thinking, a workforce that has participatory abilities, interdisciplinary workings, as well as transcultural understanding. We really want to develop competence-based education that will help named procurement officers solve new problems in unfamiliar situations. Via the LMS, we are aiming to really develop FAR transfer skills, which is a transfer of learner knowledge and skills from the taught context to another dissimilar context. We have focused on core competencies, and we have introduced those during the presentation of the framework. And we really aim to allow for named procurement officers to develop different skills continuously. So from a monitoring perspective, the LMS will also assist. Can participants confirm if they are hearing me clearly? Yes? Okay. Thank you very much. Great. So from a monitoring perspective, what we aim to achieve is that the platform will assist the OPR in tracking and reporting on the progress of the named procurement officers as they proceed upon attempting the training modules. It will also help us target our interventions where the named procurement officers need it most. So we'll be doing these assessments as the named procurement officers access the system and they go through the training modules. We, via the backend, will track their progress. If there are specific competencies or areas where we see repeated failure by named procurement officers, those will be the areas that we will say, okay, we need some type of intervention, and we will develop a strategy to best assess and target those gaps. But in order to do this, we will also need the assistance of your organizations, public bodies, in terms of the accounting officers, the HR professionals, because you will have to do your own gap analysis as it pertains to the gaps in competencies that currently exist within your procurement department. So it must be systems that work in parallel to ensure that named procurement officers have access to the necessary training, that they also are able to build their capacity in terms of what you require them to do as an organization in carrying out the procurement function. So at this stage, we would like to thank all participants for your attention. We do see that we have some questions via the chat, so we will attempt to answer these questions for you now. Feel free to post any additional questions in the chat as we proceed.